Welcome in, friends and future friends, and all those who are listening to the Sports in the World podcast here. I am Ladarius. Hope all of you are well and safe out there whenever and however you're watching, whether it's on YouTube or on the Twitter page. Hope all of you are well and safe out there. Now, today's show, like when you're always planning something, you have it written down, you know what you're gonna do, and then something happens, and we'll discuss that at the back end of the show. But there's a couple of things housekeeping things I want to not get rid of, but to kind of talk about. I want to talk about training camp, NFL training camp opening up. To share a couple of thoughts there. I might do a team by team or division by division thing, depending what you guys want. To kind of like one key or two key questions entering the with training camp. It will be trade deadline. We're getting there, and Brown's big picture. It was going to initially be one thing, but then we'll talk about the news today in the world of wrestling. We'll talk about that. I'll have somebody on. We'll talk about that. But let's jump right into the NFL training camp talk. Now, NFL training camp, for us who love football, it means football is kind of officially back. Off season, free agency, thing of the past. We are here in training camp. And here, like I said earlier, instead of trying to go to, that'd be something probably down the road, like I said, if you guys want. But to me, it's like I'm always curious about the quarterback position, and someone brought this up on a previous show that usually we would talk about the number one overall pick in the draft, who was Cam Ward, but nobody's really talking about it because in a draft class that had Shador, it had Travis Hunter, it felt it's like it's not his fault. Like, let me be clear, it's not his fault that he's not getting attention. It's just that other things in the draft, there were storylines that people felt were more important, whether we agree or disagree in that regard. But it does kind of in Tennessee. I think Tennessee with Will Levis kind of out for the season, it kind of feels like, well, this is Cam Ward's job to lose. So it's going to be interesting to see with a lot of interesting pieces there with the addition, having veterans like Tyler Lockett there. You got Calvin Ridley. It's going to be an interesting team there in Tennessee in Brian Callahan's second season, and kind of what kind of offense we're going to see where they throw the ball a little bit more, given that they have Tajay Spears and they have Tony. So we're going to see how their offense looks. That's very curious coming from the number one overall pick to see how he kind of looks. And sticking with quarterbacks, we talk about guys like Tua. And the biggest question in Miami, if you're a Dolphins fan, is that, first and foremost is his health. Because when you look at this Dolphins team, they're in a division with the Bills, with the Jets, and with the Patriots. And two of those teams have, new coaches. And Aaron Glenn for the Jets and Mike Vrabel for the Patriots. For Miami, they feel like that kind of team is that. And the one, like I said, the one question is Tua's health. Because I contend that a healthy Tua will kind of lead the way in what the Dolphins do this season. As great as Tyreek Hill is, as great as Jalen Waddle is, and we got to understand, they don't have Jonnu Smith, which I think is a huge. And yeah, they signed Darren Waller, but Darren Waller retired, and you bring him back. I don't know. I don't know how the offense is going to look different. So curious to see how Mike McDaniel kind of runs that in that terms of functionality. But shifting gears, sticking with let's talk about Shador. And I think for Shador, Joe Flacco's going to start the season. But the question is, we're going to probably see a lot of Shador potentially this offseason. Excuse me, in the preseason. And listen, when you're drafting certain quarterbacks, he's very polarizing. Don't get me wrong, but the question, and I said this coming out, and I talked about this, and I said, well, I don't think Shador is a terrible quarterback. I think he's a product of how people feel about his dad. And sometimes, Shador's numbers in college, if you kind of match it up with Jackson Dart's numbers coming out of Ole Miss, you can Google it. You can see for yourself. One went in the first round and one dropped to the fifth round. And I feel that's simply because maybe like his dad's involved, and agree to disagree about how Dion. But we understand Dion is a Hall of Famer. for a reason. He's one of the NFL's, you can argue, top 150 players of all time. So he just wants to position his kids, especially, with Shador, and then Shiloh signs a free agent, I believe, with Tampa Bay. He just wanted to position his kids to be successful. Now, whether his level of involvement and how that goes, that's a whole different conversation for another day. But, kind of circling the wagons and talking about quarterbacks, the Giants situation, once again, Brian Daboll, it's similar to the Browns situation where the veteran guy gets the nod, like Joe Flacco got the nod in Cleveland, Russell Wilson gets the nod in New York. And you look at that quarterback room, you look at Russell Wilson, you look at Shador, excuse me, I'm still on the Shador thing. You look at Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and then Jackson Dart. And it's a situation where, like, they made the right call. I feel like you start Russ to kind of start the season. And depending how the Giants season goes, will we see Jackson Dart this season? Because I feel that it's easy to throw out a rookie quarterback out there to kind of, but I think if you have a veteran presence, and I think that makes the difference. And I think a lot of these teams understand that. And I think the Browns this offseason, getting Joe Flacco is like, well, we don't know what we're going to do at quarterback, and we'll just get Joe Flacco back because that guy, I'm not going to say his name, but that guy's out for the season. And so you need some sort of direction, and Joe Flacco's the kind of guy to do it. But at some point, you got to see what Shador and even the other, and the thing is, and the other quarterback that they drafted, like you kind of got to see what they got. By the way, they got Kenny Pickett too, and they drafted Dylan Gabriel, and so the Browns quarterback room looks very interesting. I think it's Russ for now. We'll see down the road. And like I said, I want to get fantasy people. There's a lot of fantasy implications when you look at these quarterback rooms. I kind of feel to that regard. But kind of one more thing from a training camp on a personal note. A lot of good friends of mine, they went to the Falcons training camp, the first day of training camp there. And a couple of said they were very impressed with what they saw from Kyle Anthony Pitts, who I still feel I'm a believer in. And someone said they saw like the Florida Gators, Kyle Pitts, and I'm like, yeah, if that happens for the Falcons offense, it makes it better. And then think about this: chemistry with Michael Penix, and you with Drake London and Bijan, like the Falcons are poised to have a top 10, top 5 offensive season, and that proves to go like how good Zach Robinson, offensive coordinator, truly is. The question is the defense and things they've been seeing with James Pierce and Jalen Walker. And some of the moves made there from the secondary point as well. But the goal is like the pass rushes. Can we get to the quarterback? And a lot of teams are having those questions. It's not just Atlanta. It's just people question Atlanta trading back into the first round and getting James Pierce Jr. And it's like, well, we'll see. And I always say this, especially with pass rushers, we'll simply see. Because for the Bengals, it looks like their guy, Jamar Stewart, may not even play a snap this season. That's and looking at his stats in college, I felt he's kind of the wrong. It's kind of, you're not in a position to leverage. It is the best way I can describe it. But on that personal, I want to mention Kyle Pitts and listen. Kyle Pitts understands it's essentially make or break for him in Atlanta. I think picking up the $10 million option and see how he fits in this offense. And listen, like Michael Penix second year, kind of see where it goes. It's a classic risk versus reward situation where like I think the risk is minimal because like, hey, if you get what you get, you can get him to an extension. But if not, you can move on or potentially during the season trade him. Because I said don't trade him during the offseason because you hold the cards. And unless like a major tight end injury happens, then the market kind of is interesting because I was very shocked that Atlanta wasn't called when Jonnu Smith was traded by Miami. I'm surprised Miami didn't pick up the phone and call. And there's no disrespect to Darren Waller, but there's a reason why Darren Waller retired. Like, respectfully, there's a reason why he retired. So, just kind of something to, I don't want to say keep in mind, but something to think about in that role. And speaking of things to think about, I really want to get into MLB, the trade deadline, It's coming up soon before you know it. And I had on Haley Murphy on last week's show, and we talked about like potential what her Tigers needed, who are one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. If maybe you can make a case the best team in Major League Baseball, and like the things that they need. And if there's a market, and I believe if you're looking for starting pitching, I think the market is going to be very interesting. But to me, if you need a decent bat, and I wrote down some names, so I think, listen, if you're in the Baltimore and Pittsburgh area, anybody on those teams, I think the Orioles have like 9-10 expiring contracts, and it's not the season that they wanted. And if you look at a guy like Ryan O'Hearn, who's in the last year of a deal, Cedric Mullins, like Cedric Mullins is the guy, listen, solid guy, doesn't his walk right, listen, he gets on base. And I look at Ryan O'Hearn, like I like his bat a lot. So if you need kind of a bat in the infield, I would call Baltimore. I'll put it that way. And then you look at Pittsburgh, and we talked about this, myself and Haley talked about it. It's like, well, Paul Skeens getting moved, it would be a massive game changer, because it's one of those things, like you look at his record, like he has a losing record, but he has a sub 2 ERA. And Pittsburgh's not going to get rid of him unless you offer the farm. And when you look at these trades, and I say that it's about contract and control, is that if you move a guy like Paul Skeens, are you willing to kind of negotiate a long-term deal somewhere down the road and what the market demands? Because this guy's a Cy Young candidate. You know, he's a Cy Young guy. It feels like it's Zach Wheeler's award to lose. But what's the contract? You have to think a step ahead when you kind of see this more in baseball, where you're like, is this guy a rental player, or is this a guy that, you know, potentially like we may want to keep beyond this season? And it's a legitimate question. So if I'm teams, I'm like, if you can't get Paul Skeens, get the next best guy, who is Mitch Keller. Mitch Keller's contract, I think he's in the second or third year of that multi-year deal he signed, and it could be interesting. And for Pittsburgh, you know, get back some young players, get back an arm, get back a bat, get something in return. Because listen, it's easy for me, the Cubs fan, to sit here and say how bad the Pirates organization is, because they feel like it may be biased. But let me tell you something. The Pirates organization is very bad. And this is not just a first off thing. They've had great players historically, you know, and they've either moved on from, like, they got IK, you know, they got Isaiah Kinder, like he may be on the move. It's like it's like it makes you question the business model. Like, do they want to win? Like, do the Pittsburgh Pirates want to win? And like I said, it's easy for me, the Cubs fan, to sit back and say that, but I'm not the only one who says that, because Pittsburgh Pirate fans say that. But if you're looking for an arm, Mitch Keller could kind of be in the market. Now, to me, my favorite player that's out there that I feel like is going to attract a lot of attention is Eugenio Suarez from Arizona. And that's going to be interesting, because what would Arizona want? If Arizona feels like, okay, like they're not necessarily, they're sellers, but they feel like, well, we may not be able to win the division. Could we hang around in the wild card? Potentially. Could we hang around in the wild card? It's a legitimate question. But if you're Arizona, it kind of goes, what do you want to do there? And people are like, oh, well, no, if you listen, here's the thing. If you look at Arizona right now, Arizona is fourth in, listen, they're just 50 and 53. And they're 10 games back. Now, do they feel like they could make a run? Is the question. If they feel like they can make a run, I think they hang on to Eugenio Suarez and go, I think we can do something. I think we got something. But if they feel like they're out of it, like Pittsburgh's out of it. Baltimore, respectfully, is kind of out of it. But when you look at the breakdown and you kind of look at the wild card situation, and when you look at let's look at the NL, like they listen, they're 5.5 out of the wild card picture. If I say move them, because listen, the Tigers, I think the Cubs, the Tigers, and the Yankees potentially. The Yankees, I don't know. The Yankees have, they hold one of the wild card spots out there in the AL. Do they feel like adding a bat like Eugenio Suarez would that shift the dynamic? Because I think that's going to be the biggest name that I feel that, and maybe there's potentially to listen. A part of me still feels like Arizona doesn't know what to do because they feel like, well, we're 5.5 out of the wild card. And it's like, but when you look at a guy like Eugenio Suarez, 36 home runs, and listen, 93 hits, 36 homers, 86 RBIs. He's hitting 252, but listen, his slugging 593 is very impressive. His OPS is not 918. Yeah, I would kind of look at that. And I see a friend of the show. I see my buddy Craig is like, I'm just here for the Becky Hogan propaganda. You'll get your Becky Hogan propaganda. And like I said, one of the days Craig's going to have to come on the show and to understand. He tries to get me like, listen, and it's all in fun. It's all in jest. It's nothing like out of the way, or you take it as like a negative thing. It's always funny. It's always good to have him on the show. A great conversation. So, but I do want to shift gears, and I do want to talk about, like we saw here in the wrestling world, Hulk Hogan passed away at the age of 71. And I said this earlier. I was talking to a friend, and hopefully he'll join me on the show. To me, when people pass away, people die, we always, we look back at their legacy, we look back at their life. And when you tell the story of Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, you have to tell it from two different sides. And if you look on social media, it feels split. It feels like one side knows Hulk Hogan as this one-of-a-kind, unique human being who was their childhood and grew up watching him and loved him, and probably maybe that's the reason why they got into wrestling. There's that side. And then you have the side that feels like, well, he's a racist. And that he never gave an apology. He never, and more importantly, and a lot of people not only gave an apology, but not made an attempt to make said apology. And that's where it is. And I was telling a friend, is that you see this in wrestling a lot, where you have to separate the wrestler from the person. Because if you believe that the wrestler and the person is the same person, you're going to be heavily disappointed. It's like you grow up and like, yeah, you want a pony. And like, well, the best we could do is a new dog. Best we could do. It's like you're going to be disappointed. Like the dog is not terrible, but you wanted the pony. And I feel that you see it all the time. And when you look at one of the examples is when you look at Kane, who's Glenn Jacobs is the mayor of, Knox County, Tennessee, is a huge Trump guy. And it turned a lot of, I'm not here to talk about politics, but it turned a lot of people off in the wrestling community. Why? Because, well, you see the country. You see the news. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it at that. And people can't separate it. And then people will comment like the last time we saw Hulk Hogan on WWE programming was when Raw was getting started on Netflix, and I believe they were in Los Angeles. And they booed the man before his music hit. And he was supposed to, and listen, he was rushing through that speech like the Oscars play like the hurry up music. And like poor Jimmy Hart was like, "Oh, Daddy, we got to get out of here." Like it felt like people were scared. It felt like people were scared. Like Jimmy Hart's like, man, because Hulk Hogan's never been booed like that. For as much as he's never been booed like that. But the fact of the matter is, and the reality is, that's how people felt. And then some people, and like on social media, everybody has a right to their opinion. Let's be super clear. I'm not here to judge your opinion. Let's judge not, lest ye be judged, is what I say. Well, people said, well, how making people feel guilty about booing Hulk Hogan? Oh, and now he's dead. Listen, a lot of, I don't want to be like the guy in the room. A lot of people who died have been booed by a lot of massive crowds. And it's like, well, how dare you? It's like, that's how people felt. Now, you can't look back in retrospect and make people feel bad about booing Hulk Hogan. Okay, because we could play that game and be like, well, there's a lot of people, like, listen, people like the Ultimate Warrior. People didn't know the things about the Ultimate Warrior. And then after he died, it was kind of like, oh, well, a lot of people have mixed feelings about that. And when it comes to Hulk Hogan, people, listen, it's going to be mixed feelings all the way. And you simply can't convince people otherwise. The fact of the matter is that we have to have a conversation about, and it kind of ties into my big picture about having, and it's one that, it kind of low key ties into it, where I was going to talk about passion. I was going to talk about like what you love to do. And it's like, listen, like what people don't know is that I write for women's sports. A lot of people didn't know that. Like, oh, you do? Yeah, I've been doing it 4 years. People didn't know. Why didn't people know? I don't know. I post my stuff on social. It's not like I'd shy away from it. But it's a conversation that, and I say that because a lot of people don't know. And it ties into Hulk. A lot of people don't know how maybe Hulk Hogan affected their life. And it's not, listen, let me be clear. I'm not telling you how to feel. Like, if you love Hulk, you love him. You hate him, you hate him. But one of the things I'm not going to do is make you feel it's the criminal justice in me that presents both sides of the argument. And sometimes it's hard to be neutral in divisive situations. Like, I'll give you an example. The word, I know what Hulk Hogan said. In fact, and someone made a point on social media, it was 10 years to the day that those comments came out that he died. He made those comments back in I believe it was 2015. It was to the day. It was July 24th. Listen, if you believe in that, that's you. But my point is, understand is that wrestling is passion. Things what you do is passion. And people will defend people right, wrong, or indifferent. And to me, that's equally good and equally bad. Because sometimes when you're defending people, you don't want to discuss the bad. You want to focus on the good, which is optimistic, but you have to put all your cards on the table when you have these conversations. And I think a lot of people don't want to have the conversations, like with Hulk Hogan. Him getting booed on WWE programming looked bad. And now people are going to say, oh, now that he's died, oh man, oh, you guys should feel ashamed. Like, no. Like, here's the thing. Those people aren't going to apologize for how they feel in the moment. Their passion for wrestling was not superseded by how they felt about Hulk Hogan. In a way, it was. because as much as they love wrestling, when you think of wrestling, you think of Hulk Hogan. He's on a lot of people's Mount Rushmores. But after the tape came out, it became a different conversation. And when it becomes a different conversation, then it's one that people aren't ready to have. So with that being said, before we put a button on this show, I got my buddy CW on here. We're going to talk about the Hulk Hogan. He's going to share his thoughts, and I'll be silent because I've been talking for 25 minutes. So, which feels like a Guinness World Record to some. Actually, I talk more than that. But I got my stuff out, and like I say, before I turn over before I bring CW back, CW on the show, if you listen, drop your thoughts and your comments in the chat, at Ladarius Brown on Twitter and TikTok, Ladarius _ Brown Twitter and TikTok. Drop it on Instagram, Ladarius _ Brown. Even on the Facebook page, I have a Sports of the World, which I'll be getting more involved in more. It still exists, but I want to bring on CW here. Here we go.
So
and how I'm supposed to do the intros around here, pal.
I'm sorry. I was just excited. Sorry, it's been a while.
Listen, if you're excited, listen. I'm not going to say there's a joke there, but we're not going to do the joke. We're not going to do the joke. We all know the joke. We know the joke. We keep it here, and we release it when.
Exactly.
But don't hold on too long because I heard it's not good for your health. But now,
anyway, it's not. It's never good.
But C-Dub, thank you for coming on, joining me on the back end of the show. I appreciate it. And I was just talking. I don't know if you were listening before you came on, but I was sharing my thoughts on Hulk Hogan, how we talk about passion and how we talk about how we have the conversation about separating, kind of in a way, fiction from reality to a certain degree. How we separate the performer from the person. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the whole Hulk Hogan situation, and like I said, just curious to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's like this. If you are someone that is a fan, but you've never really dig deep about Hulk Hogan politics, you're devastated. Okay, like you'll see the good in everything. And what the problem is, or it's like this. So there's that. All right. There's Hulk Hogan, that 80s icon that did everything. And before we got to know the nitty gritty, it was more of, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's going on. All right. Then you have Terry Bollea, the person. And then you also have to now add the fact of, because people heard Hulk Hogan's, basically his views. All right. So look, I think what number one needs to happen first, because I know a lot of people probably losing their minds on Twitter, and believe it or not, I actually really haven't dove a lot into it. I've seen what people post, as in when they post it in groups and stuff. But honestly, here's what I'm going to say: if you want to cheer or have good memories about Hogan, you can. All right, I'm not judging you as a person if that's someone that someone touched in your lifetime. Now, for people that analyze wrestling, people that, talk about wrestling and know of what Hulk Hogan did and how he basically treated and basically held down a lot of competition, not just for the other guys, but his own companies wherever he went. And so add that frustration, then add the other frustration. He never aged gracefully. He never, some of the opinions he had, you just were looking at him going, dude, read the room. And I think, in a world where, like, Black Twitter, we all have fun. I mean, that's been hilarious. But it's just been also, I just want people to understand, don't attack the fans if someone has a view of them, okay? Because no matter what, we were all fans one time. That's kind of how I've always lived. It's like we were fans of wrestling. Who got us into it? That's one thing. I remember Macho Man was one guy I loved, and then I love the Ultimate Warrior for a time being. As a fan, you kind of go through wrestlers, because years go by. Hulk Hogan's legacy, he's got his place. So that's why I'm like John Cena will say what he says. Ric Flair will say what he says. Taker will say what he says. Here's my thing. We all know this about Hogan. Without Hulk Hogan, could you tell the story of wrestling? That is something you have to ask. Without Hulk Hogan, could you tell the story of WWE or WWF at the time? So, with that being said, he does have a spot in that regard. Now, other regards, I still think he was a piece of junk. I really do. And, you're never going to hear me apologize for that because, like I said, you treat people the way you do. Well, here's the thing. He had multiple times to make it right. He never did. So, look, he passed away. Someone lost a husband. Someone lost a husband. Someone lost a dad. Someone lost a dear friend. I'm not making fun of those people. It's nothing against them. It's just saying I hadn't, it's the old saying, hey, I'm not going to speak ill of the dead. Well, sometimes the reputation speaks for itself. One guy said, you know what? When I die, I want to be written on my tombstone. I was right. And that made me laugh because as someone wrote, well, what would Hulk Hogan's tombstone say? I said, doesn't work for me, brother. So, look, as someone that watched wrestling for years, like when I was a kid all the way now, part of me, it's sad, but it also is a part of life. You go, man, I was more sad about Piper. I was more sad about, the Iron Sheik. There are other wrestlers that have passed away, and it's like this. I think if Hogan would have been accountable to what he said that fateful day, I think you would actually see more of an outpouring. I really do. That's just my thought. And I feel bad because I think, it was owed. He should have. As big, and the only reason I'm saying this, as big of an icon as he was. People loved him. People followed him. And then, all that craziness with the American beer. And look, I hope they don't sell that anymore now. But yeah, that's just my thoughts on it. And I just, like I said, man, I know how you were feeling. And, I wanted just to come on the tail end and just say what I thought. And, it's just, and I'm not even going to get mad if WWE decides to, do something. I guarantee they're not playing live audio, though. They're not going to play Hulk Hogan coming out where the crowd's booing him, though, that night at Netflix debut. Although if they did, that would be great. that would be the definition of tone down. We want to play the last thing Hulk Hogan said. Doesn't work for me, brother.
Boy, this is why it's one of the things, and I'll say this before we put a button on it. Is that, and I think a lot of it is what you said. I kind of alluded to earlier, but I think adding on to the part is that it's something you expounded on. Something I talked about. It's like listen, we have to understand is that people there's two sides to this, and I think it goes back to separating Terry Bollea from Hulk Hogan, because like I said, to many people, Hulk Hogan is wrestling. They're the reason why they got into wrestling, and whether people admit it or not, like if you think about arguably maybe one of the biggest game changers in the history of wrestling, it involved Hulk Hogan when he did a Bash at the Beach for WCW. It changed him going from this all-time babyface to this heel. It was a game changer in wrestling, not just WCW, but in wrestling.
Yeah.
And when you think about that, like like, and but however, people say, well, I remember what he did, which is fine. It's just that we have to put things in perspective. It's like when, and like I said to lead off when I led off the segment, it is that like when our time is called, we have a legacy and we leave people behind. How
Hmm.
we're how we're viewed, a lot of it, C Dub, is not in our control. All we
Yeah.
can do is, be ourselves. To me, just stick to the core of who you are. Whoever, I don't judge. I'm not trying to change people how you are. I'm not trying to say here's a checklist to get into here or to get into there. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that checklist. All I'm saying is that we have a legacy and we have people to leave behind. And with that legacy, half the time we don't write it. And sometimes, like, we would like to think we write it, but we don't sometimes. And in the case of Hulk
No.
Hogan, like before what he did, like that man was still like this titan. He was very Zeus like. He was like a god. And then but however what came out, in fact, I think it came out 10 years to the day today that those comments came out. And I said
Yeah.
earlier, I said then, I said, take it as you will. I said like, listen, I'm like, hey, that's whatever. But but at that
Think
moment,
about it, that was 10 years. Yeah.
and it's like it changes the scope. It changed the scope of how people felt about it, whether it's good,
Hmm.
bad, or indifferent. And at the end of the day, like the best way to talk about it is like when you hear like the Ric Flairs and the John Cena's and the Undertakers, even with Triple H or WWE, we have to understand they see him as the wrestler, as the
Yeah.
performer. Whether it's competing in the ring against them or
Hmm.
just
Yeah.
the impact on the business. And
Yes.
and people like, and I tell people, you can't, like I said earlier, you can't tell people how to feel because, and I think we talked about this earlier hours ago off camera, where we talked about, like I told you, it's like you can't tell people how to feel, because, however,
Hmm.
when the whole incident happened, guess what? It changed a lot of people. It didn't change the mindset of a lot of people, but it did for others. Which is, like
Yeah.
I said, which is okay. It's like I'm not gonna sit here and be like, what you like? How dare you side with him? Like I'm not.
Hmm.
It's like this. Do I like what his comments were? Absolutely not. But I understand why people feel the way that they do, and we always have that one or two people in our lives that, heaven forbid, when they passed away, we were like, why are they saying nice things about him? Because they have
Yeah.
their perspective about him, and you have your perspective about them and they have theirs. It doesn't mean that yours is right, theirs is wrong, or vice versa. And that's the way I think that's how things should be shaped. And but in the wrestling community, it's gonna continuously be a divisive conversation for sure. It's just
Yeah.
not today. It's gonna be there for a while. So
Yeah. You're gonna have people poke and prod or try to really aggravate. My thing is this. That's why I said what I said. Let people think the way they want. I mean, because in all reality, that's kind of like same with sports teams. You're gonna like who you're gonna like.
mhm.
My and I agree with you. It's just you know I just go back to the day when all that happened. Is just like you're going. You know when athletes or celebrities get caught like that, you would go, okay, what do I have to do to fix this? And this guy was like, nah, F that. Let me do it my way. So, but you see what happened. And like I said, I really believe if he would have said something, if he would have actually taken some accountability, believe, in my heart of hearts, Hulk Hogan, when his death came out, it would not have been more of a joke. It would actually have been more of a sad event. But because the way he was, the way he conducted himself, a lot of people cannot separate Terry Bollea from Hogan because we don't know who's who.
Mhm.
And that is very hard. And you said something about legacy. You can't control it. You're right. Can't. And some people want to control it. But my thing is this: once you pass, you can't control anything. And hold on.
Are you still there?
Sorry, wife had been work. My wife was working late, and she messaged me. So she's like, "I'm going to Chick-fil-A. You want anything?" I'm like, yeah, Jesus, chick. Sorry.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, but seriously, is yeah, I know that's what I call it here. Uh, but no, seriously, it's like I look at it and I just go, what if, what could have? Think about this: Iron Sheik, Roddy Piper, Macho Man. When those men die, Ultimate Warrior got people in their fields.
Mm-hmm.
And when Hogan dies, it was a party or kind of a fiesta because it was like, oh man, all the jokes and everything. And I was like going, dang, Hulk, if he would have done it right, he could have had, if not more of a, like people mourning him a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Like I saw one text going, Jesse won, he lives. I'm like, I wouldn't go that far. But no, seriously, it's like I saw that and I just was like, man, just you see that and you're just like going, I don't want to be like, man, what does Twitter become? Because you know what? Look, it's not. Let's be honest. A lot of people tweet aren't the same people if you saw them face to face.
Right.
Can we agree to that? It's like you're on a keyboard, you type what you want, you hit send. There is no accountability. There is no, you're going to see, like Rhea Ripley's not kicking down your door going, how dare you talk about Buddy Murphy? She will not do that. So you get away with it. So then you say more stuff like you say to the women. We talk about how the women that get harassed all the time, and the guys. My thing is this. Eventually, that you have to put a stop to. But the reason I'm going to that realm is we always go back to look who's doing this, though. It's usually a select few or those brazen people. They don't represent everybody. So but I do wonder if he would have been more accountable, more, just saying, hey, I was lost in the moment. I was stupid. I shouldn't have said what I said. Pause. Look, even if it was BS, would it work? I don't know. But he didn't even make that attempt. And I really, what's funny? I still have that picture of Booker T in my head looking at Hogan. And to me, look, what there is, that's his legacy. People looking at him and just being like, And I think when you say you don't control your legacy, you are so right. You really are. Because I guarantee you he wouldn't want that.
Yeah. And like I say, and we have Millie Mills here dropping in saying the lad stirred C-Dub, what's up? Thank you for joining. Thank you guys for joining me here on the Sports of the World podcast. But look, before we put a button on it, I'm going to say this: is that I think at the end of the day, like I said, what we do in our life, only thing we could control is what we can control. We can control how we react. We can control our words. We can control our actions. How it's received, how it's perceived, how it's received and perceived. It's not up to us. Because at the end of the day, when we put things out in the atmosphere, how people receive it is how people receive it. And that's what makes and creates the situation where for Hulk Hogan, it's going to be a divisive thing. And listen, at the end of the day, like you talked about, like I talked about, Someone lost their husband today. Someone lost their father today. Someone lost their good friend today. You think of guys like
Mm-hmm.
Eric Bischoff, and you think of like Jimmy Hart. You think of those like you think of people who were really close to him. Like
Yeah.
and I say, and it's a double edged sword. I feel that in my opinion. So
Yeah. That's why I feel like I hope I mean, look, people are going to be what they do. They're going to do what they do. But I really wouldn't be hunting down Bischoff. I wouldn't be hunting down Jim or anyone that says anything because again, they knew the guy. They were
mhm,
with him. And sometimes you can't look past that. You have to, if maybe they were able to deal with stuff that we wouldn't, that I get it. But again, he had peers. He had people that did look at him. Look, am I saying you're supposed to be an angel? No, not at all. What I'm saying is just don't, let's not get too stupid. I'm trying not to be mean about it or cuss or anything, but I'm just saying, I really think fans sometimes need to just pause back. Let's put it this way. If you saw if you watched NXT and you saw the tribute they did for Ozzy Osbourne, and let's be honest, that was a touching tribute, a
mhm,
very touching tribute. You know they're going to do something for Hogan. You do. I know that he might. They might. I don't at this point. I don't even care if they boo or not. I don't even think it's part of a story. Yeah, I think if anything, yeah, you could laugh. But honestly, they're gonna do it. He's a part of the fabric. Again, Ladarius said it, and I think I've said it. Can you tell the story of WWE without Hulk Hogan? I mean, whether you like it or not, just like there's some other guys you can say that with. Can you tell the story without Roddy Piper? Can you tell the story without you know? Hate to say his name, but VKM. You
yep,
know. So and look, I think we all know what's going to happen when that one croaks. But
yeah,
we'll save that for that podcast, not now.
yeah,
But but yeah, I agree with you, man. I think I just seeing it. It's like, look, in my humor, I'm gonna love watching stuff because I love laughing. I believe you need to laugh more than being mad. But I do feel like I just hope fans don't get stupid and attack people that actually had a relationship because what you said, someone's dad, someone's best friend, someone's confidant, you know, and look, it's not our job to judge where he goes. He'll go wherever he's called to go. That ain't our problem. We don't we That's above our pay grade, y'all.
yeah. It is. And it's funny, but it is. So with that being said, I'll put a button on this episode. But before we go, Cedar,
Mm-hmm.
tell the people where they can find you and your stuff.
CW28 on YouTube. We're going to be coming back soon. We want to get training camp going, just seeing what they do. Because, usually the first day, it's not too adventurous, but obviously we hear about Troy Anderson being on the pub list. Like I said, that's like telling me water is wet, for 4 years. What you call it? You also have, stories about Kurt because now we have a quarterback injury. Fields got carted off in the morning, so we don't really know what all that details. So we're going to be talking about that eventually. Like I said, I want to give a couple of days, kind of let the stories break out so we can know what to talk about. Me, Ladarius, and Ron are going to be teaming up. Man, that'll be fun because we got a whole lot to say about NBA, WWE. We might even talk about football for sure, but and just some nonsense. We're going to have some fun. We'll be talking shenanigans, and probably talk about Steven Seagal and his wonderful movies that went straight to a Blu-ray or straight to VHS, and everyone just puts it on that wobbly table that you trying to keep even.
Yeah, it's a safe.
Oh
No,
man, no,
but
no, no. I wouldn't dare use that thing for anything. It's like this. Oh, you want to watch it? Shoot, are you really mad, man? By the way, if you want a good laugh, go to Space One. It's a YouTube channel. And this guy makes fun of Steven Seagal movies a lot. They don't pay me to say it. I'm gonna just say it. Oh, let's just put it this way: when I'm just needing something to watch just to get to 8 o'clock, I just put it on and I'm just laughing because it's so awful. It really is. It's so awful. It's so bad. He calls out everything, and you're just going, man, this man really is that bad. But yeah, guys, that's how you can find me. Also, I'm debating on talking about DC Dark Legion gaming. A lot of people have been hitting me up about it because I got picked. What was it? One of the YouTube channels. They had a giveaway, and I won 2 of the 3 prizes. So it was quite hilarious. So JD the Gamer hooked me up. So I appreciate that. But yeah, well, been real tempted to talk about it. So it'll be fun. It's just just keeping us busy so we don't get stir crazy in the house. You know what that means?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. 10-4.
Yeah.
Well, once again, C-Dub, thank you for joining me here on the podcast. And
No problem, brother.
Reminder: like, listen, and subscribe to this episode. Every episode of the Sports in the World podcast. And until you see and hear me again next time, I'm Ladarius. Be real, be you, be blessed, and more importantly, be safe from all of us here from the Sports and the World podcast.